Time now to look at the French papers. Belle Lupton is with us in studio. Good day to you, Belle.
Hello, Eve.
Now, one of the big stories on most of the front pages isn't actually well, it's not completely a French story. It's the Suez Canal in Egypt.
It is, and it's certainly on the front pages of, I'd say, almost all of the main papers here in France. If we start with Libération, on their front page, it takes up the picture of the Suez Canal, takes up the whole of the front page. And inside the paper, you have the headline, Al-Sisi walks on water. But far from dreaming of being Jesus, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is apparently dreaming of being the new Nasser. So that was the celebrated president who nationalised the Suez Canal in 1956, taking it back from the British and from the French. Now, the paper says that al-Sisi is counting on the fact that the wider canal will attract foreign capital and relight the patriotic flame.
But there's not just economic advantages then for the president.
No, he's also trying to bolster his own sort of personality cult and his own sense of power. So Libération tells us that the Egyptian press is on a loop, endlessly praising the completion of this new canal, glorifying the people and the army. Le Figaro picks up on this theme as well. In an article, it headlines it, a matter of pride for Egypt. There you go, une histoire de fierté pour l'Égypte. So this is a country celebrating its return as a major world player, according to the Egyptian press. L'Opinion, on the front page, also says that France is invited to share in these Egyptian celebrations. It leads with the headline, Hollande's Egypt campaign. So the French president will be a guest of honour at the inauguration later on. He's going to be there with Defence Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian, who apparently is on his 4th trip to Egypt in 1 year. But as the paper points out, France isn't visiting Egypt to give lessons on democracy or on human rights, but rather to show itself or show its place in the international military state, on the military stage, international military stage. 3 of the 24 Rafale fighter planes that were sold from France to Egypt will be circling overhead. They'll be doing a flyby overhead later on in the inauguration. And below, underneath them, will be the Frem frigate that Egypt bought from the French. So this is a strategic partnership above all, which makes Le Figaro wince, they say. So one thing to highlight, though, is that Libération, which is centre-left, and Le Figaro, centre-right, are actually agreeing on one thing, which is that this is definitely a honeymoon period between Egypt and France.
Okay, interesting analysis there. Now, there's another international story getting a lot of coverage across the world, here in France, no doubt as well. Hiroshima, the anniversary.
Yes, and it's not only the front page of communist paper L'Humanité, but it's also the subject of the whole paper. They've dedicated today's edition to a special on the bomb attack that killed 140,000 people in the Japanese town of Hiroshima. Their headline, which, funnily enough, we are not seeing. They've obviously changed it since. Their headline, I can assure you, if you actually buy the paper, is 6th of August, 1945, hell. So they are they're making no bones about the fact that this was absolutely a disastrous situation. Le Monde also remembers the bomb on their front page with Hiroshima, a memory that is still alive. So this was a cataclysm, they say, that was unleashed by the US, so pointing the finger there. And 70 years later, Japan still hasn't overcome the trauma of nuclear. Memories that live on for the survivors, and those memories are detailed with witness accounts in La Croix, a Catholic paper, which tells the stories of some of these hibakusha victims. So these are people who are survivors of the nuclear attack. They're gradually agreeing to tell their stories because in Japan, being a victim of radiation makes you a social pariah. It's something that you hide. It's a shame that's hidden from society. Now, those lucky enough to have children, according to La Croix, actually have to think very long and hard before they tell those children whether to say, actually, I was a victim. And there's poignant accounts both in Le Monde and in La Croix in which some of the women who have survived this attack tell the papers how close they came to committing suicide, having gotten through what's essentially the worst thing you can come through.
Yeah, a sense of pride for a lot of other people to have survived and lived on. Now, some French papers are also looking at the American side of this story.
Yes, and Le Figaro is scathing about the Americans' response to the 70-year anniversary. They say the US keeps its version of history. That's the headline that they have there. 70 years later, Washington makes timid gestures despite public opinion. So no national remorse from the US, according to Le Figaro, where 50% of Americans still think today that dropping the bomb was justified. Of course, the story is that this saved millions of American lives. Obama's administration, they say, is treading on eggshells, trying to maintain a strategic relationship with Japan, whilst also having to fight those militants within the US who are saying, don't concede to them.
OK, we're going to have to leave it at that for now, Bill, but you'll be back again in our 9 a.m. edition with all the international papers. That wraps it up for this edition. Do take care.